Morning, students. Let's talk about the prologue in Strange Pilgrims. I'm just going to talk for maybe 10 minutes. Apologize for the big glare on the screen. So here are some of the terms you need to know to start reading. So the prologue is kind of like a brief introduction. Pro meaning for. So what we have here is Strange Pilgrims. And again, we're not reading a long novel, we're reading the 12 stories. They're interrelated, and the narrator is the same in about 5 or 6 stories. And if it's not him telling the story, then it's one of his sons, okay? And so, why did I choose this collection of short stories? I think it's a unique perspective. Remember, literature is really universal, so I don't think it matters what I choose. You could relate to, you know, um, pretty much any writer from any culture because it's really universal. What's different about this author? Of course, he's going to see things from his Colombian point of view and Latino point of view for sure, and his having lived in Europe. He likes to characterize a lot of Latinos living in Europe and the problems they face, of course, discrimination, racism to some extent, their own superstitions, their own kind of obsession with Roman Catholicism, better known as the Catholic Church, and of course the Pope. So a number of characters are going to try to meet the Pope, and things may or may not work out well for them. So the superstitions, magical realism. We'll get into these. There's a video on magical realism on Canvas. I'll show you. And so we've got on the one hand the depiction of the Europeans through the eyes of a Latino writer, Colombian writer, and it's not a pretty picture. So he's very open about criticizing Europeans, okay, and projecting his values on them. Okay, pretty conservative as far as gender values, gender roles, I should say. And whether he's serious or not about that, we'll see. But also, he's very open to criticizing Latinos. There's one, Maria, the Mexican woman, and he really criticizes her a lot, being unfaithful, being talented, but kind of lazy, kind of dumb. She runs out of gas in the Moregros Desert out there in Spain. Okay. Um, so what he says in the prologue, well, amongst other things, you're going to have to read it and search yourself. So it's about 4 or 5 pages. I'm just going to read you the first paragraph quickly here. We'll be done. So it says the prologue. Why 12? Why stories? Why pilgrim? So you got to think of this whole metaphor of the pilgrim, the pilgrimage. Usually it's for a religious person, a purpose, but in this case, it's really not. It's more for self fulfillment, you might say. Okay, the 12 stories in this book were written over the period of 18 years. Before they reached their current form, 5 of them had been journalistic notes and screenplays, and one was a television serial. 15 years ago, I recounted another during a taped interview with a friend who transcribed and published the story, and now I've rewritten it on the basis of his version. This has been a strange creative experience that should be explained, if only so that children who want to be writers when they grow up will know how insatiable and abrasive the writing habit can be. So, key words there, insatiable. So, that can't be satisfied. So, no matter how much you write, according to him, you can't quite satisfy that urge. You're not getting satisfaction from writing much. And the other word, abrasive. So abrasive is usually something offensive. Usually a person can be abrasive, but here we have a writing process that's abrasive, which is a process which is writing. So it is a pretty crazy profession to try to write for a living, and even writing journalistic pieces, for a newspaper, as he was doing in Europe, Barcelona, Madrid, Rome. Okay. Of course, he was writing for the Latin world, but anyway. So we need to think about other things he says in the prologue. One of the things is he says, you have to set up everything in a short story in the first paragraph. So I'll keep coming back to that. So, so I've listed some terms on the board here. You can probably barely see them. We've got style. So you have to set your style in your first paragraph when you're writing. And of course, the same in a research paper or a literacy essay, persuasive essay. You want to establish that style. His style is rather flowery long sentences. And of course, in Spanish, sentences do tend to be fairly long. Okay. Tone, his tone, sometimes humorous, sometimes sad, sometimes serious, sometimes depressed. So that's what tone is. Really the feelings of the author coming through in the subject matter. Okay. Okay, next thing, theme. What's the message? So in an early story, Bon Voyage, Mr. President, it's definitely about old age and facing the fact of your own death. Problems with the medical profession, definitely, because they cannot find the old ex-president's. They can't find out what his illness is. They conclude it's in his groin area after all this business about his back and everything else. And so it's really the author making fun of the medical profession. Okay, and he makes fun of psychiatry, he makes fun of the medical profession, dietitians, almost every profession too, almost suggesting they're all quacks. They don't really know what they're doing. And finally, characterization. How do you develop the ideas about a character? How do you create this image for the reader of a character? So those are some of the things we need to start with. So again, according to the author, everything needs to be set up in the first paragraph. So read the prologue. I'll have some questions for you about it, and we'll go from there. Then we'll get on to the 12 stories. Okay,